when you went to university, did you study art? You didn't study art. It sounded like your friends were studying art, and you were like kind of happy that you didn't get like burnt out on it. First, where did you go to school? Where did you end up going to uni?
I went to a really, really funny and awesome little college in St. Augustine called Flagler College.
A former Flagler person here as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it has a great art program.
It does.
And what?
Yeah. It has a great art program.
It's a phenomenal art program, but you didn't do the art program.
I didn't. I dipped my toe in, but I didn't major in it. I majored in comm.
Wow. That's what I did, communications. That was really fun.
I did comm, and then I think ultimately what happened was I got there and I started off in the comm department, initially thinking that I wanted to get into, and this is really wild for me to consider now, but it was broadcasting. I wanted to do something with the radio station. And I think getting maybe like a couple classes with it, I was like, I don't know, like if I'm a little anxious, and I'm an anxious person, I don't know if this is going to translate well. And so I ended up going into the comm department more with like PR and marketing and that stuff. But my roommates were all there on like scholarship as like fine art students. And that was what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to do this. My parents ultimately were kind of like, we would love it if you do something, for helping you pay for school. That's, I know, I don't want to say that they were supportive, but also kind of like get something to fall back on, I think was the term back in that day. So yeah. I surrogately experienced the art department through, again, my classmates, but specifically the roommates that I had that were like going through some really rigorous classes, which I know you probably even know some of the professors because they would have been really intense. And I won't name names. But yeah, I remember just seeing that and being like, man, I want to do that, but I also don't want to. They were burned out towards the end of it. They didn't want to do creative stuff towards the end of it, which, the art supplies were always out in our kitchen at the house that we rented. And yeah, my roommates would be making these really elaborate portfolio projects for these finals, and I would just be journaling, which is what I called it. So I was like filling up journals and stuff, and the pastels are out, and they're like doing their really elaborate photorealistic nude drawings, and I'm just like, oh man, can I borrow that? But yeah, it was a little bit of a scavenger situation.
Well, sometimes like coming in from an outside, perspective can really also give you more freedom sometimes when you do go to a school specifically for something creative, particularly, you can kind of box yourself in thinking this is art or this is only art and this is the only thing that will be recognized rather than coming in just being more playful, which it seems like a lot of your artwork is,
Absolutely.
That must have given you an advantage.
Yeah, I try and be like a little cautious with this, but I do, because I was in the environment around students that were learning, I guess, in air quotes, the correct way to draw, or what these are proportions. And before you do this, you have to learn how to do this. You're not allowed to do abstract stuff until you've mastered this thing. And I think I do subscribe a little bit to that, believe it or not, despite what it is I do now. But I also don't entirely agree with that mode of teaching. Because I see stuff now particularly that's the most inspiring to me, and it's like children's books illustrations that have been copied by children that I'm looking at and going like, oh my gosh, that's inspiring to me. And it's gone through 2 funnels to get to me, and like perhaps none of those people went to this school and had this professor. But then on the flip, I absolutely do love a like wildly pretentious artist statement that I get to like get a kick out of when I read on the wall, and I'm like, oh man, that's hilarious. Like, that's great. It's really long, but it is tinfoil stuck to the wall with a banana peel or whatever, and I like it all. I just am happy I didn't get that negative rub, which I think so many people, and not just in art, with all creative facets, or art, I should say, in the visual sense, get. Most of the people again, a fellow Mainer, Stephen King, everyone knows the story about him being told like by a teacher, like, I think he handed in Carrie or something to a teacher, and they were like, this is trash, and you're never going to write. And I love those stories. We all do, because you're like, yeah.
Do you think, looking back at it, that the skating and looking at guys like Ed and Thomas who are a bit older kind of gave you the And even just skating
absolutely.
itself, you have to do things 1,000 times before you get it right and you bang up your shins. But like you accept that. Is that like
Totally.
something that kind of moved it towards making it more possible maybe for you?
Oh, I mean, I'm still there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still, I look at, I think, and I wonder, and again, these last 2 years have been a little stifling in a sense because I'm such a community-based person in person. I really enjoy being like at that time at the skate park with a bunch of people trying a trick, or being in the water with surfing around a bunch of people, and with the art stuff, again, in the kitchen at the rental house in Florida with other students making stuff together. So that's, I think the proverbial banging of the shins happens the most or in the best way with a group around me. I don't know sometimes if I'm banging my shins up if I'm by myself and it's through a screen, or the way in which they were sharing what we're creating now, because I was truly enjoying myself making things and not thinking particularly they were good, and then maybe they'd go to a coffee shop and get hung, or maybe someone put on a t-shirt, and then you reach a point later after a few years, or after however many hours they say the 10,000 hour rule, that sometimes the people that you really looked up to know of you, or maybe know of you for a good reason, or you get to they become peers, I guess. And that's, I don't know, that's really tremendous to me. I think that's ultimately, I guess, the banging of the shins leads to, I guess, the metaphorical landing of the trick is just that you get to be in a community and have peers that ultimately are people that you can call on and bounce ideas off of.
How have you been dealing then with COVID? It seems like, yeah, you're quite in one, like you were quite a nomad for a while, constantly traveling, and it seemed like that fueled a lot of your art and inspiration. And in the last 2 years, obviously, it's become much more difficult to do, and it's been harder to obviously connect in person with different parts of our communities. How has that affected your art in the last 2 years, and what have you been doing or looking for as inspiration?
Yeah, God, that's a really great question, because I don't really know. I mean, because I would be lying if I said that it hasn't been really, really hard. I said to my partner the other day, I was like, sometimes I feel like I have to almost remind myself to advocate for myself, if that, be it like via like a client, if I'm doing some design work for someone, because all of our experiences the last, I guess it's almost 2 years now, however long this thing, I wish we had a really nice word for it, but like the thing, that has been experienced differently geographically by people, belief systems of people, just so differently. So for me personally, you're absolutely dead, like hitting the nail on the head, and that I was traveling so much really for about like a 3 to 4 year period where I was just saying yes to a lot of projects, and it was awesome, and I really enjoyed it. On the flip, I think I was perhaps not maybe advocating for myself in certain ways, and definitely telling people some things that maybe weren't entirely accurate, in the sense I was like, I want to settle down, but my behavior was totally not doing that. But it was very inspiring creatively for me. So I see that as going, okay, well, it changed drastically when I wasn't able to travel. And now, in a beautiful way, I met my partner, who actually is born and raised and from Vermont. And so now I live relatively landlocked, but in close enough to where I'm from originally. And it is kind of like a snap of fingers where I'm like, wow, that happened outside of my control. And it did take the pandemic, to kind of force me into it, because I think I was telling people in my travels, like, yeah, I really want to settle and want to meet someone and blah, 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 and I think some of it was bullshit. It was a pickup line, whether it be, whatever. It's like, not a pickup, well, sometimes, but
well, it's romantic.
What I mean? It's like,
it's romantic. It's a story romantic. We tell ourselves, It's a romantic story to tell ourselves when we're doing it. I found that to be the case for myself as well. So absolutely.
Yeah, and it took a pretty intense, whatever shift, whether cultural and pandemic based. That was just like, hey, you're gonna sit in a spot for a while. And then the silver lining of it was, it got me closer to my family geographically, which was good. the obvious is that I'm happy in a relationship, which I was single for a period of time, and I don't think that was really particularly great for me. I'm good having a chaperone. And then creatively, to answer it, I guess, your initial question with it, it's changed because so much of what I love is interacting with people and in person. And so that changing, I think I have like this really anxious, burning desire to get back on that horse to some extent, but also doing it in a smart way. And my partner and I talk about that. I'm like, okay, if everything were to open up and everybody's in it, for a lot of us it is, opened all back up, but it's like I could just go to Japan tomorrow again and it would be easy. But would I go for
to be quarantined?
Exactly. Would I go back to Japan and just be there for a month just because I want to be there? And it's like I'm thinking a little bit more about my decisions, and I guess that's somewhat getting older, and then also just being a little smart or a little more business savvy with how I'm making those decisions. But yeah, I'm hungry. I'm hungry to travel.
But you like once said, you mentioned that like your mom had said like it's escapism, right? Like do you think
Absolutely.
there was any truth to that now? And you also mentioned like having a pulled back view. It like gave you a pulled back view of things. Like how does that stand up now that you've stayed put?
Yeah, that's great for the heart. It has a tremendous amount of escapism in it, and I think there's a substantial amount of, and it goes somewhat, I think, hand in hand with social media culture and people looking at other people's lives and the envy complex, and people really being like, man, I really wish I was in New Jersey today because the waves were clean there, because here I was, shoveling the driveway. And you're there posting and you go, yeah, you envy me because Ben Gravy's getting this wild wave, and I'm like, oh man, and I haven't surfed in a month, but also I'm not really focusing on anything that's around me, and not to sound like an infographic or something, but I think the escapism was an addiction. Absolutely. And, totally. Yeah. And so the pullback view, I always would love to, when I was traveling, or I would say years prior to the pandemic, was thinking, man, if something's bad and I do a pullback view, it makes it a little bit better. But then when you're really stationary and forced to be, you kind of are like, I don't want to do a pullback view too much because I'm starting to look at stuff and be like, this is bad and it's getting bigger bad. And I need to work on that, and I guess the answer is that it's a wild work in progress, whether it be doing headspace every day or trying to make sure I get up and go for walks and stuff, but just being like, all right, I know that other people that are seeming as though that they're doing whatever it is they want to do are also on the flip, having their days too. So.
You also said then, so I'm curious, so I'm driving at something here a little bit, I'm curious, with your artwork, and how this might be changing it, is you once said your work doesn't ask very much of people and that it's relatively simple. Is that pushing you more now to have to tackle something more heavy or with more layers?
I'm definitely hiding more in it than I used to. Yeah, and I think, this is something I've given so much thought to lately, but I think, for a lot of people in the creative community, they make things with the sole purpose of sharing it, not necessarily just to, as of right now, of course there's your, your Bon Iver type guy that's going to go get the Cabin in the Woods and make the great breakup album. And I think we romanticize about that. For me, I'm going to be really upfront. I love working. I love what I do for work. And I love getting to meet people and getting to work with new people. I love that stuff. But it's very, ultimately for the past few years, it was very commerce-based. I was like, this is great that I'm able to make a living and own a home and do these things, and it's fun, and I get to do it. But yes, I wasn't necessarily injecting too much of my personal life and stuff. It's colorful, tropical-based patterns, and I think, again, lack of vitamin D and a pandemic, and you're in a cold place, you're like, all right, I think I'm gonna maybe and again, I still want to have it be a strive for something. I don't want to make dark, sad stuff.
No.
But at the same time, I'm like, let's make it a little more, because I'm sarcastic, make it a little more thought-provoking, make it a little bit